Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us on this week's panel conversation. I'm really excited that you're able to join us. We've got a couple of great leaders in law enforcement that are going to be sharing their perspectives about how community input impacts the delivery of police services in communities. I think that given the timing of all of the things that are going on in our world right now, this kind of conversation is really very important. We're going to be talking about the challenges that law enforcement officers and departments are facing as they try to understand what community perspectives are, as well as probably just as importantly, how they manage those perspectives as they go about the business of delivering public safety services to their community. And our goal today is really just that you pick up an idea, that you gain a perspective, that you find something that you might be able to use in your own operations to help make your job and your community more successful. Here's the format for today. We're going to be getting into the conversation in just a minute after I introduce the panelists, and then I'll kick off the conversation, and we have three questions that we'll be entertaining. Each of the panelists will have an opportunity to respond to those questions. And then we'll follow it up. We'll see if the panelists have any questions of each other before we wrap it up. And if that's okay, we'll jump right into it. Let me introduce our first panelist. Rex Mark is an accomplished professional law enforcement leader. Rex has got over 30 years of experience in public sector leadership, having served in municipalities across the country at various ranks, including the chief of police. Mr. Marks is also providing consultant services for national and international organizations to extend opportunities for lifelong learning and progressive change management practices. Academically, Mr. Marks is very accomplished. He actually holds 2 master's degrees in organizational leadership and public administration. And he is also a graduate of the Rural Executive Management Institute, Southern Police Institute, and has done just extensive formalized law enforcement training. He's taken it one step further, though, by working on his doctorate in public administration. And I'm really intrigued by the topic that he's chosen to study, and that is addressing the causal factors of crime and violent crime with a concentration in terrorism, leadership, and community sustainability and livability. Rex, thanks so much for joining us, and I would love it if you would just add a little bit to that short little bio.
Well, sure. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the invite here today and look forward to the conversation. Again, as you said, over 30 years in law enforcement, I've had the distinct advantage and opportunity and honor to serve in 5 different communities across 3 states of our country and take the practice of leadership and public service to a new level each and every time. So building that into the formal education, and as you referenced, my doctorate work in violence and violent crime, finding those causal factors, I think is key to developing that sustainability within our communities and improving upon the quality of life for our kids in the future.
That's great. Given that the level of study that you're doing right now, I think this conversation fits right into that topic. How long do you have left in your doctorate work?
Well, 6 months when I put it into it. So we're about 6 months out. So it'll take that long to complete the research and do the defense.
Well, Rex, thanks a lot for joining us. I really appreciate that.
Much appreciated.
Let me introduce Chris Morgan, who's a crisis intervention specialist in North Richland Hills, Texas. He's an experienced and dedicated law enforcement officer and instructor. He's got over 17 years of experience in training. He's done a lot of instruction at the FBI Basic Negotiator Course and with the U.S. Army Special Force Assistance Brigade. Chris has got many challenges in his responsibility in negotiating crisis type of events, and he's been recognized for his creativity and for his empathy-driven approach to justice and public safety. Chris, thank you for joining us, and I would love to have you add on a little bit of color to your background.
No, just like Rex said, I'm happy to be here. I've always felt like being a negotiator, I feel like communication is key to a lot of our issues in law enforcement. A lot of times we draw that blue line between us and the community, and sometimes I feel like we've kind of been our own worst enemy in a lot of ways when it comes to helping people understand what's happening and what's going on with us. So it's always been one of my drivers behind how I approached what we do. not only in just communications, but just our general mindset in law enforcement. It's just a different time, and it requires officers to think about and approach the problems that we're facing today in just a completely different way than it has been, even at the start of my career.
Chris, how large is your department and how many people do you serve?
We are at about 113 sworn, and we have, quite a big civilian staff, some volunteers. Our community is about 80,000, 22 square miles or so.
Yeah, so significant responsibility serving a significant number of people. Appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking the time out to share your ideas today.
I'm glad to.
So let me kind of cue up the topic a little bit. We're really talking about putting police needs and expectations into a community context. As a city manager of over 30 years, I got to say that public safety is always one of those responsibilities that helps to set the overall character and flavor of a community. It's one of those things that touches every aspect of what a city does, and the overarching responsibilities that police departments have and law enforcement officers have. It's a very complex and challenging role, but an extremely important role. And the expectations are high, but the impacts of making a wrong decision are also high. And as you guys know, sometimes when you make a wrong decision at a community, it has generational impacts, and you see it happen all around the country when there isn't leadership and there isn't the right connections with your residents, and if leadership isn't there to help make sure that you've got solid governance going around. And then, of course, right now you throw on a pandemic, and all of the other evolving and changing community characteristics. And it just creates an atmosphere where it becomes all that much more important that we're pulling in members of the community to have engagement and to have that connection that's important to just keep the community running smoothly. We've done a lot of research in my role as Vice President of National Engagement with POLCO. And we've gone out and we've actually researched the country about where resident sentiments are. We have a tool that's called the National Police Services Survey, which is really designed to help capture community perspectives around policing. And we administered a national survey in 2018 as well as in 2020. And one of this chart actually indicates the changes in priorities that residents have between the 2 years. Now, a lot has happened over the course of the past 2 years, but as you start to think of that shift in overall priorities based on those experiences and things that have been going on in the world, two of the things that really stand out to me are where the shifts have actually gone up. And those are really with trying the residents' interest and desire to have closer relationships with police departments, as well as to do more partnerships in neighborhood police solving. And so as you start to think about all of the shifts, those connections are also one of the things that residents are actually looking for. And so in these times of really turbulent times in our communities, and all of the civil unrest and social justice issues that have been evolving, we seem to be at a very prime time for getting into a conversation about how do you go about making those connections work, and how can we go about building and strengthening them for other communities. So these are the three questions that we're going to be talking about today. The first question is, what role should the community play in guiding or influencing the delivery of local police services? The second is, what strategies do you use for managing community expectations? And finally, what tools and methods do you use to understand resident expectations and priorities regarding local police services? So if you guys are ready, let's just kick right off into the questions. And Rex, I'd like to start with you. Rex, can you just talk about the role that the community should play in guiding or influencing the delivery of local police services? Sorry.
It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. Yes, absolutely. I think first, before we even do that, we need to look at historically a little bit, a historical perspective of how the engagement has occurred in the past. It's been very much a reactionary type of approach where law enforcement responds to a call for service generated by the public. The feedback or the problem solving, if you will, and that needs to take place in the past has been limited to the intelligence that the police department possesses at that time. Now what we're seeing is the onset of internet, social media, the smartphone, which is driving a lot of the community concerns, oftentimes because they now have a greater need or a shorter time to need that information from police department. So I think to the question specifically is, what role do they play? They're significant. This is a partnership. This is not a dictator type of approach where a law enforcement agency defines all boundaries, all rules of engagement. It really is a community partnership that needs to take place. And a lot of that occurs because the police department becomes more transparent. And we're seeing this across the country, around the world for that matter, a heightened interest in what police actions are taking place, why they're taking place, and how often they take place. So I think in terms of engaging with the community, we really need to look at activity in terms of those expectations through continuous engagement with town hall meetings, the coffees with the town hall environment, opportunities to speak at city council meetings, opportunities to speak at civic events, and be active in your communities. These are areas where I have found success in. I've seen other agencies, other police chiefs also find great success in reaching out and demonstrating their willingness to listen, not just to communicate outward, but to also receive that feedback and what those expectations are. As you shared, Matt, my research is on the causal factors of violence and violent crime. A lot of that comes from understanding the root causes of the incidents that lead to that violence. As we see, our youth are a significant influence of that. And what we've noted over the last several decades now, at least 5, has been the degradation of that nuclear family environment, a breakdown which is now allowing the student, the youth, to have to find answers on their own. So again, getting engaged at the community level, as from schools to civic organizations, publicized town hall events, transparency through social media, websites, and that type of technology, I think is really critical in understanding, number one, what the community is expecting, and number two, how you can meet that expectation in terms of services. Now, all of us have the background here of working in public sector and recognizing there are limitations, obviously, to the financial ability to provide and meet all expectations. But if we develop a prioritization of those expectations and we deliver on a timely fashion and we hold to our word and we maintain our transparency in the process, we build that trust relationship. And ultimately that trust relationship, I truly believe, is going to be the essence of identifying what a community needs, expects, wants, and how the agency can in turn respond to it.
Yeah, that actually brings up a lot of times in these panel conversations, I hear the term building capital or community capital and
Correct.
the role that plays. Over the course of your law enforcement career, any observations in terms of the shifts in the levels of people's engagement in the community? Or I think you've brought up a couple of really important issues in terms of how social media is impacting people's connectedness, but any perspective from your long career in law enforcement about just kind of how the community characteristics have changed?
Sure. I think one of the things to consider is in 30 years of being on the job and in these different communities, the role of law enforcement remains the same. Crime is crime. Fighting crime, prosecuting crime remains the same. The difference is what the community's expectation is in regards to specific crime, what their perception is as to what is most significant, and in responding to that. So what I've seen is a definite change in that. I've worked in a variety of communities from 12,000 to 200,000 population. And while the concerns are the same, the engagement is different. And the engagement, it seemed to me to be more increased in the smaller communities where there is a sense of community, a sense of engagement already established, where they feel like their voice is actually being heard in the community. I think that's a significant piece. Some of the larger metropolitan environments may not experience the opportunity to be engaged at that level. And I think that in some ways stifles the response from the community or the willingness to contribute to the information. So it leaves leadership with a limited perspective in which to form their response and their actions. And so I think really the goal is to increase that communication, leverage the media and social media platforms in a way that's going to allow the agency to inform the community where they receive their information. And I think that's really going to be the key to increasing the participation and ultimately developing that trust in the community.
Yep, that's great. Thanks, Rick. That's a wonderful perspective. I really appreciate that. Chris, can you share your thoughts on what role the community should play in guiding or influencing the delivery of police services in North Richland Hills?
So yeah, absolutely. I'm right along with Rex on that. I think that the community tells us exactly what they want from us, and sometimes being problem solvers, it's often hard for police officers to kind of hear that message. But I always refer back to, in fact, what Rex brought up made me think of this was what Sir Robert Peel brought up in his Principles of Policing, and the number 7 was, the police are the public and the public's the police, and the only difference between us is we just have a job to uphold what they want, it's I think it's we've maybe drifted a little bit. It's hard to not kind of get a bit of a separation or hide behind that blue line or us versus them mentality in a lot of this. But overall, I think we need to really embrace that, the community does tell us what they want from us. And as far as like trying to, manage that, I don't know that I would use the term manage other than inform their expectation. Managing it sort of sounds like trying to herd cats in a way. I mean, we only get to control our piece of it. So my thought process on that would be is, what can we do to promote an educated citizenry so that they can inform their own opinions and then bring that back to us, and let us know what they want from that.
Chris, can I ask you a question? I'm going to have you address some of the management issues in the second question, but in North Richland Hills, do you have a strategic plan that you incorporate some level of public involvement, which allows you then to get residents' perspectives on the ways that of getting that input on what you do or what you should do?
Yes. So we have a few things. Probably the easy one is annually we do a citizen survey that goes out to the public, and they weigh in on pretty much every aspect of the city, whether it's, or do they feel like the streets are in good enough condition versus, all the way through, what's their feedback for all the first responders, police department included. And like I said, that's annually that goes out. Unfortunately, we usually do decently. We have a good supportive community here. We also have, we participate in National Night Out, where we go out and, each year and go and talk to the public and bounce around from, whichever homes are hosting events and try to engage in conversations there. We have a Citizens Police Academy where they come and learn a little bit about us and then provide feedback on what more they want. And then probably kind of the core or maybe the biggest influencer outside of the annual report was we have a citizens that participate in a training group. So twice a year, they are able to see what we're talking about presenting for our in-service training each year. They have input to that based on, what may be happening, what they may have said 4 years ago is probably not at all going to be like what they want to, bring up now. And then they'll meet again after any legislative changes. So anything that comes out of the Texas legislature that's impacting policing, they will discuss with our training group to help set priorities and what they would like to see from it.
Okay. Chris, can you talk about, this is really going to be getting more into the management of resident expectations, and you've mentioned that a couple, but I'd love to just capture your thoughts again on the strategies that you use for helping to manage those resident perspectives.
I think we use, if I'm answering this correctly, social media quite a bit in, trying to be, Rex said it best, just as transparent as we possibly can, and be fair across the board. But, if there's information that needs to be got out quickly and, make sure that it's accurate, we use social media quite a bit. In fact, we have someone who is a full-time public information officer for us that manages our social media. So not only would she, whatever thing she wants to put online, all the way up, from where we're going to be doing traffic enforcement to a critical incident that may be going down in that moment, responding to a scene, all the way through things like we'll do Facebook Live, so like a virtual town hall of sorts, things of that nature. Other than that, we try to just have a lot of other community engagement, where we just try to create as much interaction as we possibly can to give people opportunities to bring up issues within, to give us the opportunity to bring our perspective back into it to kind of help, I guess manage would be the right, way to put that, manage the realities of what we're discussing.
Chris, one of the things that I'd love to just get your quick response to is, you're in a tough job and you do a lot of negotiations in critical situations, and you undoubtedly have the public surrounding you in times, and how you go about managing their expectations for you to immediately solve it in a way that's in a really kind of a stressful kind of a situation. Anything that you could share with people who would see this that would help them to understand your role and how it plays into the delivery of police services?
Absolutely. I think I guess the common term is the CSI effect of police work, that people see how things work on TV, and that, I'm going to grab a bullhorn and all of a sudden, within 5 minutes solve an issue. And I think what people would probably best take away is that, every issue starts with some emotional core. There's some emotion that's led to the moment that we are in, pretty much no matter what version of police work we're doing at the time. And without diffusing the emotional aspect of it and then start the rapport building, there's really just no way to effectively mitigate the crisis. It is a process, and processes take time.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's interesting. That's such a challenging responsibility that you have. My hat's off to you in those situations, man. Rex, can you share with us strategies that you recommend in helping to manage resident expectations in the delivery of police services?
Sure. I think when you look at those expectations, they the perspective. Sometimes they're extreme, and again, it's because of the impatience of our society today and the expectation of immediate gratification. So when we look at these things, we have to prioritize it. Similar to the survey you shared earlier, Matt, is looking at how the public perceives various conditions within their community in terms of safety, and responding to those priorities. When we whittle it all down, it all comes down to the same things. We like quiet, safe communities where we can raise our families, where we can go to work unthreatened, and where our kids can have a good education. And so much of that is influenced by other factors now, and technology certainly adds to it. When we look at community engagement, and I think Chris brought up a very good example, is the Neighborhood Watch and National Night Out type of engagement. That's a great way to manage and find out ultimately what the community truly values in terms of essential services. And whenever we look at budgets, and you, of course, Matt, from your background, have had to weather this many times, looking at how you prioritize this funding and the expenditures for the year through the budget process. You have to know, again, what your community is expecting from the services. So in this case, exercising your interpersonal skills through these national night outs and other events is a serious thing. One of our biggest villains, I should say, in law enforcement is Willis Carrier, founder of the air conditioner. What happened when we developed air conditioning? Well, people stopped leaving their doors open with screens open. They started closing their doors. They stopped engaging with their neighbors. We're so much a door-to-door society now, where we hit a button, we raise our garage door, we park our car, we put the door down, we never see our neighbor. A lot of the expectations then are self-developed. What we develop them in our own minds. We have our own perceptions based on our limited exposure in our own communities. And so a lot of it comes down to getting out and engaging. So I have found success in holding events where the community is brought out into the public to develop that interpersonal relationship again. And I think that really is key to defining what is perception and what is reality when we start talking about expectations in the community. What is safety? What is violence? What is fear? How does fear drive our expectations? Nobody likes to have a violent crime happen in their neighborhood, but we have to put into perspective what were the issues that rose to that level of violence that created that situation. It doesn't always occur in every neighborhood or every home or every community. So again, putting that in perspective, not living in fear, but asking the question why and understanding what it is. And I think, again, it comes through that transparency of the law enforcement agency, engaging their community on that level. And number one, accepting vulnerability. We don't come into this with all of the answers. That was the old model. But I think Sir Robert Peel is a great example. I appreciate Chris bringing that forward, because he is the father of modern day community policing. And what community policing truly is getting to know your neighbor, getting to know your community member, and being a part of the community. And whether we live in our communities that we serve or whether we don't is irrelevant. Are you a part of that community? You are at least 40 hours a week. And as a result, you have an obligation to get engaged and understand. And the best way to do that is through interpersonal skills. Engagements at restaurants, engagements at coffee shops, engagements at gas stations. There's any number of cases, officers going out and engaging in the parks with kids, showing that they're a positive role model. That really goes a long way. And just to wrap that up is that, early in my career, I got into motor patrol, and bringing a motorcycle into a very rough community. First persons that come up to you are usually the kids. They're excited to see this big shiny motorcycle and they want to talk about it. Usually in the shadows are the parents, and the parents want to talk to you and they want to share things, but they feel that it's going to make them vulnerable. So they have to communicate in a way through their child to get that message to you that they want to share information. So it really does break down a lot of barriers by doing things that are not the norm, engaging in different approaches, finding different ways to meet your community where they are, where they live, and then understand that we don't have those answers necessarily, but the community does. And then soliciting those responses from the community.
I think those perspectives are just great. I love you bringing up the carrier, what I'll call the carrier effect.
Yeah.
The air conditioning effect, because you're right. People kind of close themselves off and they don't connect with their neighbors at all. And so right. They really do end up isolating themselves, which then we know from our research that only half the people in the community have had any kind of interactions with the police over the prior 12 months. And so right. Their perspectives are being shaped by different methods. It's just as important to understand what those experiences are from people who have had those experiences, because in many cases, they're very positive interactions because they're at neighborhood parks or they're at the events that you've talked about. And just finding opportunities to sharing those kind of conversations. Thanks a lot for that perspective. That was very, very helpful.
You bet.
Rex, can you continue on and talk about some of the tools and methods that you would recommend that local leaders in law enforcement would use for getting resident expectations and priorities and needs as it relates to police services in the community?
Sure. Well, again, using the annual surveys is always a great tool. It does give you a perspective, but we know that we're looking at a response rate typically in the 30 to 40% range, if we're lucky. And so that doesn't necessarily cover everybody. So again, monthly events where the public is invited to share input, to share the perspective. I have personally had the opportunity to establish these monthly events and pose a question, a specific question. Generally, it comes from those surveys that go out, or it may be an issue that was brought to a council member, for example. And I'll pose that question out across the social media and have the public start to chime in, and then we'll hold an event, and that will be usually the focal point to get the conversation started. And I tend to reach out to less common groups as well. We talked about the civic organizations. They are a phenomenal source of information. The Chamber of Commerce, the Rotaries, the Lions Clubs, you name it. They're a tremendous source. They are the warriors in our communities. We all know that. But at the same time, the less conventional ones that people don't think about are the real estate companies, the real estate boards, the local representation, expanding that relationship, theater, arts and theater, libraries, having talks at a library event. A lot of our libraries used to hold a weekly readings, and they pick a book. It could be a children's focus, or it could be adult reading club. Those are great venues to go in and engage a community and get their perspective on a different level. You'd be amazed how quickly that spreads. It spreads faster than the virus. Okay, so the word gets out. The police are interested. The police want to talk. The community is being heard, and that's a tremendous tool to leveraging that path to getting to understand your community better. So the other part is just, again, the immersion approach to the community engagement. Being engaged 100%, whether, again, you live in the community that you serve or you don't, you have the ability and you have a need, obviously, for services. Therefore, leverage this opportunity to engage in that community. If North Richland Hills, for example, if I tended to do a lot of my business there and I served in their agency, I would try to engage that community even in my off-duty hours and be a part of it and become familiar with what's going on, not just when I'm in uniform, because obviously people see us coming first, but to engage them not in uniform and be able to understand some of the things that they perceive as being critical. How critical is it? Maybe it's not critical to me, but it certainly is to them. Therefore, I do have an obligation to respond to that. And I think that's really a lot of it. It's literally forming strategic communications from an organizational level, standing behind it, accepting responsibility and accountability when you're wrong, and understanding that things are going to change. New information is going to come about. New aspects of community concerns are going to be presented. And when they are, you need to respond accordingly. It may require modification of your response. Maybe patrol hours change, maybe patrol responsibilities change, maybe reporting needs change. You have to be flexible and adaptive in order to be an effective and emergent leader as a lifelong learner of your community.
That's great, Rex. I am so glad that you brought up the real estate aspect of it. And if I can, this is the first time that topic has come or that perspective has been shared, but I want to add on to it and get just a quick perspective back from you. I think that real estate, I carry a real estate license, but as a city manager, I would always try to attend real estate sales meetings because you get the benefit of both sides. You hear what the realtors are hearing from people who are looking to move into the community, and it could be a safety issue, it could be whatever the issue is, but you're hearing from people who are talking to people who are interested in moving into your community. But you're also able to share with those real estate agents who are kind of your leading cheerleaders in the community about things that are going on in the community, whether it be public safety or what have you. And so that avenue, I think, is a really valuable community channel that can help you define the message, brand the community, as well as give you the information that you need as a law enforcement leader to react, realign resources, whatever the appropriate response is. But
Right.
any just kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Matt. It's unconventional, but here's the other thing. Not only are you getting in there and hearing the perspective of what people are looking for, but you also get the interpretation from the real estate agents themselves on what they deem the city's focus to be, and what their message is outward. I've had many encounters with real estate groups, county boards, participating in their weekly meetings, and sharing with them the development plans that the city has for the community, and then getting their take on it. You'd be surprised at how little the real estate agent may truly know about the community and the infrastructure, and how things work. And I think being well versed about your community and not living in your silo of service, which has been my whole career. I've been very untraditional as a police chief, spending a lot of my time in community development, and engaging in the financial side of how a city works, from that perspective of how do we draw business in, how do we build our community to be stronger and sustainable, but how do we meet the expectations again of the folks that are trying to move to our area. Here in Texas, we're seeing a huge influx of people. We're seeing in the neighborhood of 100 to 150,000 new residents, probably more, every year. And we had record numbers in 2017 of 400,000 new residents in Texas. Those are substantial numbers. What are they coming here for? Finding out what is drawing them to the area will help law enforcement certainly understand better how to serve that community and meet that expectation. So the other part about real estate too is that they are seeing a market trend. They see a national level as well as a localized level, and I think they become a source of information on that level for us in terms of identifying how we can continue to move that wave forward positively in our communities.
Yeah, thanks for following up on that. I really appreciate that perspective.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Chris, you had talked a little bit earlier about some of the tools and methods that you're using in North Richland Hills for getting resident perspectives, but can you revisit them and share with us in a little bit more length on what you're finding to be successful in getting resident perspectives?
Yeah, one of the big groups that we saw just didn't have enough of a voice in our community was the Hispanic community. So one of our detectives, who is Hispanic, she actually put together a group we call Unidos, where it was specifically an outreach to that group. One, there was a bit of an inherent distrust that happened there, and sometimes it can be a community that handles its own issues. They don't necessarily go outside to policing. So she wanted to find a way to bridge that gap to give them more of a voice in what we were doing. We've actually found that to be a good program in giving them an outlet to be able to reach us, but also us reach back out to them. One of the things that Rex brought up, it jogged something loose in my head from, I think it was the Verbal Judo book, where it takes 12 positive interactions to erase one negative interaction. And if predominantly we are seen as enforcers, it's tough for us to, and the average person has a little less than 2 police interactions in the course of their life. Well, where are the rest of those interactions going to come from? And so that means we do have to kind of step out, not only from the top, but the bottom, and, in policing, and get out there and give people their voices. I know we have a summer camp for kids. We try to be pretty heavily engaged with the youth, to show that they're, good role models, that it's not just what you see on TV or in the media. So we have a read along where we'll go to the schools and read books with the kids. We participate pretty heavily in our technology school that the Birdville ISD has. They have a criminal justice program there that we go and instruct at, and with classes and participate in some competitions they have. And we also have a summer camp for kids each year, and then even all the way out to Shop with a Cop at Christmas time. Trying to think of any of the other top. We also try to reach out to our elderly quite a bit. We have a Fix It Blitz, that goes along with our neighborhood services. So while COVID has had all of us isolated over the last year and a half, many of our elderly spend most of their days isolated. And so we would have a program where we will reach out if an officer notices or a neighbor notices, or even if the person just says, contacts our neighborhood services and says, we need help, fixing this fence or mowing the yard or whatever. We have a program where we go out and have those interactions as well.
Chris, can you expand? I didn't let you have much of an opportunity during the first question, but can you expand on the citizens training group? I think that's a really innovative approach to engage with your residents on meaningful things that would have more of a legislative or policy impact on things that are impacting the community.
Absolutely. So we have several that sit on the group. I think currently it's 4 or 5. They have a pretty broad range of backgrounds. I know one of them works for Birdville ISD. One of them comes from a medical field. And I also think her husband is a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And, basically what it does is, they have shown that they're an inquisitive group. So they ask questions about what's going on, help us understand these things, and then use that information. As I said, so currently we're going through our 40-hour in-service, and, we have certain classes that are mandated, like implicit bias, racial profiling, and things of that nature. But we also brought forth classes on officer wellness and how that impacts use of force. We, de-escalation and all those things. And we kind of created this nested thing, but it was all with their input. Like, all this information goes to them. And here's, what do you all find is important? Bring that to us so that we can structure some classes around it or fold it into the things that we have to achieve each year. And it's been really good. I mean, our interactions with them have been positive. They don't leap to the misunderstanding. They really do try to understand our issues as well as the things that they know from coming outside of police work, and mash those together.
Yeah, it's my sense is that it gives you a balancing voice in the conversations that you're having internally, outside pressures or directives, policies that are impacting the department. It's a great citizen board to kind of help you gain, to have that interactive ability to connect with your residents on things that are important or impacting you.
Yes.
Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. A lot of just really cool things have come up, and I appreciate your thoughts and your comments. Do you guys have any questions of each other or any thoughts that you want to follow up on at all?
Well, Matt, if I could just to go back again on the second question there, engaging and managing community expectations. We're in a unique time here. Obviously, the pandemic created a lot of shuttering of businesses, a lot of stay at home, a lot of transition from workplace to work home environments. And I think one of the things that we see is that we realize what we can literally live without. We can survive without a lot of things. But what we have seen, including this platform here with Zoom calls, is the increase in the technology demand for engagement. This is how we are maintaining our connectivity with the outside world as we see it. And I call it Tech Connect is my approach. But I think it's important that we recognize, and I think Chris even alluded to it, that there are people that for whatever reason do not function outside of their home, or certainly outside of their even immediate community. They stay very close. So they have a limited exposure, if you will, to other things. Sharing through technology, whether it's at the city level, whether it's at the department level, sharing out and presenting this type of a forum for engagement is a valuable piece. I've had agencies involved with television productions, actually running their own television show every week or every month to air those critical issues that the community is concerned about, and then trying to resolve that. So I think there's a lot we can do with the technology without becoming dependent upon it to share out the information that we need. And it really becomes strategic, recognizing that we have to understand our clientele to deliver that message. And if I may, I would share one example. One of the, you shared my background working with international clients. One of those clients was Jamaica. And Jamaica, with a 15,000 person law enforcement arm, which is a duplicate of their military, two separate arms of their government. But the 15,000 people that serve the Jamaican population and the tourist population have something very important and very significant that I think we lack here in the U.S., and that's emotional intelligence. They have a very strong understanding of emotional and social intelligence, what they need as well as what their clients, their customers need. In Jamaica, as what they call themselves as an emerging first world country, the problem that they have is that they are so dependent on that tourism. If they don't understand the needs of those clients, those customers coming to their island, they won't have any income. They will fail and they will cease to exist. And so they recognize understanding, so they get to know you. If you haven't been to Jamaica, they're wonderful people, but as you probably also read and see, there's a high level of violence and crime. And because there's that difference occurs, the Jamaican government has made it a priority for their police department to understand their client, get involved with their customers, meet them where they need to be. I've been there, and you get personal escorts to the various resorts because they want you to see the best of their island, not the worst. And they want to make sure that you want to come back. And so they put a lot of effort into it. I think if the U.S. would do that same approach, and we've had that conversation here today about how to do that. But I think if we took that approach and we tried to understand, be emotionally intelligent and socially intelligent about our community and our role with our community, I think we'd be much more successful in meeting the expectations.
Yeah, thanks for that. You're so right that public safety is one of those global issues, and having the benefit of gaining perspectives from different international environments really is helpful and can easily feed into the conversations that we're having today in our disruptive kind of world. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally appreciate it. Chris, any final thoughts from you?
No, I think Rex gets to cheat by speaking ahead of me a little bit. Yeah, I do think, and that's one of the things we've started kind of broaching the topic on in our officer wellness. The emotional intelligence would do us a great service if officers understood themselves better, and then were able to apply that outward toward the public as a whole. I'm a big fan of Stoicism, and one of the philosophers says, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth because we should listen twice as much as we talk. And I think that kind of mindset of really not just hearing, but truly listening would actually benefit us in the long run, because we have no real hope of having any real influence or persuasion if we keep that old mindset that Rex had, that brought up earlier of we already know what to do here. We don't need your input on this.
Right.
We'll only really be able to affect any kind of change as a whole, us or society, if we're not listening to the public.
Yeah, no, that's that leads directly into kind of these closing thoughts. Both of you have just presented some great perspectives on the value of kind of recognizing how dynamic of an environment we're currently living in, and the critical aspect of staying on top of what the current needs are so that you can realign your resources accordingly, and to use those creative ways of getting around the fact that we're all locking ourselves in by pushing community events and those face-to-face opportunities. Rex, I totally agree with you that this forced technology that communities have had to kind of absorb and learn this last year is certainly going to lead to opportunities for bringing communities and people together in a new way going forward. And technology is going to be one of the mainstays in how that's doing, how that is accomplished. But the value of understanding resident perspectives will help for them to gain a better appreciation for law enforcement services that are provided. And Chris, your notion of you need to have more positives than negatives or you're not going to gain ground is so true. And so finding ways to have those opportunities is going to help kind of build that sense of community and build those connectedness, and hopefully provide the demonstration of trust and accountability that police departments and communities across the country and probably the world are always trying to address. So your perspectives and thoughts, guys, have just been wonderful today, and really appreciate you sharing them with others. Let me just kind of finish up by sharing with you that I'll follow up with you with information and contact information for both of you. We record these every week, and so if you have other folks that you think might be interested in participating in the conversation, by all means, let me know about it. I'd love to get connected with them. And I will connect with you as well, just to get more feedback on how this panel is operated and anything that you think would help build it to make it more successful going forward. We want to make sure that we're sharing ideas in a meaningful way that benefit local leaders in law enforcement, and your perspectives and your thoughts would really help in that regard. I'm always trying to improve the way that we do these. And one of the great benefits that I have is I get to meet two great guys and panelists every week. And this was no exception today. So thanks so much for sharing your time today, and really happy to meet both of you and wish you the best of luck in everything that you're doing.
Well, thanks, Matt, for the opportunity. Chris, it was great to meet you. We'll have to get together and have lunch.
Yeah. Where did you say you were? You were?
I'm in McKinney.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm just a skip away.
World, but
yeah.
Going together, guys.
Absolutely. There's Louisville or Carrollton in the middle.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much. Have a great one.
You too.